Hello and welcome to a Ross Dillon video where today you join me for my 1999 Honda Civic track car. This is an EM1 coupe, so it is the coupe version of the EK-shaped Civic, and it's been my main car for sort of the last year and a half, and I thought I would discuss sort of the good things, the bad things, and most of all, we can't talk about a Honda without discussing the godly thing that's VTEC, which if you wait for it, I'm sure you can also hear as I'm driving along this lovely whistle. That's the one thing that is, sorry, just pothole dodging as well. Gotta love that I pay an extreme amount of road tax for them to fix the road. The one thing that has broken on this car in the year is the window regulator, which unfortunately means this window is now slightly open and whistles like an absolute bastard. But let's get into the video. So you now join me out in the lovely scenery of Lincolnshire with my Civic, and I'd like to kick off this video with reliability. So it is a Japanese car, it is made by Honda, so I've actually not had particularly any breakdowns. The only two times I've had issues with this vehicle, the first one did actually leave me stranded. I had a bolt for the air conditioning tensioner fall out and go through that rim. Which again was just unfortunate, not really the car's fault. I had changed the belts the week before, and with it being a high revving rattly engine, it's obviously worked loose. And the only other time I actually ever had a problem that actually was more of a failure, more of a breakdown, was I had the valve cover seals fail, which filled up the spark plug ports with oil. So then it started misfiring, backfiring, and not running very well. But simple part from Tegua, and about 20 to 30 quid, and again about half an hour of my time, and we were back up and running. And I've put just shy of 9,000 miles on this car, along with a track day, two track days at Donington and 2 track days at Kerborough Sprint Circuit. And again, with it being a Honda, it doesn't exactly get driven lightly. So, if you're worried about a Honda from a reliability point, I wouldn't be. This one's done 133,000 miles, and it's about to come off the road because it is due a top-end rebuild. It's starting to burn oil. No, not all Honda engines should. It's just getting to that age, so it's time for a refresh. But other than that, really not let me down on reliability. Now, this is going to be an interesting one, which is creature comforts and comfort in general for the car. So when I first picked it up, it had the full VTI interior, so I had the seats, the rear seats, the lot. Since then they've been replaced with no rear seats and bucket seats. And actually, surprisingly, the car isn't awful. Now, again, this has been spec'd out like a track car, so it's gutted in the rear. We have a big bore exhaust and an intake, and we have polyurethane engine mounts, which do bring a lot of vibration into the vehicle, but overall comfort is actually surprising. I find with the surprisingly long wheelbase, on a long journey it actually absorbs bumps considerably nicer than my old Toyota Starlet. And again, even though these seats don't have as much padding, that long wheelbase just seems to just bounce a lot better on the road, and for a long journey it's not horrific. Now recently I've had to start wearing my AirPods on longer journeys just to sort of drown out some of the noise, but again that's more my own doing by removing the interior. So again, if you've got it track spec, I wouldn't enjoy the long drive, but if you keep it with a standard interior, surprisingly comfortable even with that big bore exhaust. When we actually look at the factory finish of the interior, it is very Japanese, very plasticky, very 90s era. The standard stereo system, I'm pretty sure, still has a tape deck. This one's been swapped out with a modern one with aux and CD, which is obviously a bonus in this day and age. However, I would like to say that although it is very 90s, I'm not against it. I love having mechanical buttons. All of these switches are very nice feeling, everything's very mechanical, everything's got a good thunk, and all of it still works, which, even though it's plasticky and from the 90s, is a bit of a shock, to be honest. A lot of these new cars with the touchscreens, I don't like that. Why have you got to look away to turn the heating up? So let's speak about the running costs of the vehicle, which actually are pleasantly surprising. So first of all, we're going to start with the road tax, which it's a 1.6 made before 2001, so it sits just in the higher category at £325 here in the UK, and that's for 12 months. We then go on to insurance. I'm going to pop up what the insurance group is now, because I can't remember, but I found it surprisingly cheap to insure. It's not actually horrific. Again, it is only a 1.6, and particularly with the coupes, there's not many of them on the road. Now, the one that some of you might be interested by is actually fuel, which recently has shocked me. With a check of the tyre pressure ratings for the vehicle, I recently found I've been running the car at 30 psi, but for this vehicle it should be around 35. And what I've actually found on some longer journeys, sort of across the country from sort of Shropshire to Lincolnshire, I've been achieving 35 mpg, and on a more of a motorway run, which I did across from Shropshire to Milton Keynes, I got 38 mpg, which again, not amazing by today's standards for a petrol. However, there's a 1999 8,000 RPM screaming petrol. So does it make sense as a daily? Not necessarily, but if you're doing low miles, it's actually not that bad. Now, I would like to flip it on its head and actually say that when I went to Donington Park for the day, including the 50-mile drive there, about 100 miles on track, 50 miles back, it did only average about 19.5, 20 mpg, which obviously a bit more representative if you're going to thrash it. With a bit of a mix, I tend to get around 30 on sort of day-to-day, running about, a little bit of a pull here and there. If you're really going to go out on a B-road bash, probably 24, 25. But again, not bad for what it is. If you keep it out of VTEC, you're going to really see the fuel consumption drop massively. So let's speak about the mods on this vehicle, of which there are a fair few. So first of all, we're going to start with suspension. So this has Coney shocks all round with some sort of spring. Again, not sure on the spring, but I'd say it's probably a 40mm lowering spring. And those shocks, I think, are what equate to the ride comfort. They're an uprated shock rather than a standard shock, which really helps. I found on my Starlet, with standard shocks, with the lowering springs, it's just not a pleasant ride. They're just not suited. They're not designed for that travel. These, much better. In terms of other suspension mods, I know lots of people go to town on the hard race arms and all your adjustable bits, but this actually doesn't have any of them. The only other one it does have are adjustable tow arms in the rear, but that was more because I was doing some rust restoration underneath and unfortunately had to cut them out. That's one of the really common places these seem to fail pretty catastrophically for rust, and the shell is underneath where the tow arms fit in the rear. There's like a corner, it just seems to rust a lot. I think mine's been undercoated in the past, which has helped to treat the rest of the vehicle, but those areas just didn't survive, so I've had to actually weld some plates in there where it's completely rusted through. Also in the rear, I do have a subframe brace. When I first got this, someone had fitted the anti-roll bar without the brace, and that subsequently did cause the subframe to crack, of which I've had properly welded and a nice big thick steel plate added, and then I've used the brace to properly fix the anti-roll bar, which ever since has not given me any hassle. Brakes all round, we've got on the front, we've got 282mm brakes off the EK9 and DC2 Integras. On the rear, I think there are 262, again off the EK9. These actually still are the 4x100 stub pattern, which originally came on the car, which I prefer because for wheels, you can get MX5 wheels, you can get all sorts for these cars really easily. Under the bonnet or hood for you on the other side of the pond, we have the B16A2 engine, of which this one is actually pretty standard, with the very standard Honda modifications under the bonnet being a nice big intake and a lovely exhaust. That exhaust is a 4:1 manifold. It's a 2.5-inch exhaust then, through a sports cat. There's a couple of resonators and a back box, which makes it very track friendly, although it is still quite loud. As for the exterior, it is a facelift Civic with the EM1 and SI coupes only being made in 99 and 2000. It is fairly standard. We've got the very standard EK grille in the front, which is a very standard eBay modification, and on the back we actually have a Subaru spoiler, believe it or not. So these did come factory with a small little spoiler, but someone's obviously swapped that out for a Subaru one, which I think is quite nice. It's a bit different to the other ones, not seen on, well, I've not seen it on any others, so I quite like it. And then obviously we have these stripes, which I got a bit excited with the vinyl cutter one evening before Japfest. I personally like them. I think they're very suit to the 90s Japanese era, but obviously they're not for everyone's taste. And I think that comes on to the last point about this car. If you're quite a quiet person and you want to pootle around town and keep quiet to yourself and keep to yourself and keep to the conforms of society, do you really want one of these? And that's probably not. That's probably the worst thing I've had with this car, that I try to be as respectful as I can for what it is, particularly in local towns. But you seem to just be hated. Let's be honest, it's loud, it's got big pink stripes on, so unless you're 12, you're probably going to hate it. But again, it's just part of a lot of driving around a modified car, and it doesn't bother me, because at the end of the day, if a bit of noise is really hurting someone, they should probably grow up. So that wraps it up for the Civic. This won't be the last video of this car. It is sadly going away for winter while I move to my new job and start saving some money ready to actually refresh the vehicle. But I'd like you guys in the comments to let me know, do you drive a Civic? Are you a Japanese car lover? What do you guys drive? Whether it's anything from the sort of 90s era, that's where my interest really lies. But again, anything up to the latest in the range. Let me know down in the comments, and thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.